Deion Sanders has a problem with negative recruiting. All right, guys. This to me is incredibly hypocritical. If you're going to hire your son as a social media manager, if you're going to try to control your image, the one thing you don't do is come out and say that other people are trying to control your image. I'm a Deion Sanders fan. I have enjoyed the content and the storyline. I don't necessarily think he's going to win a national championship anytime soon, but I've enjoyed it. This to me, though, is very fallible. When you're doing so much to control your image and you don't expect other coaches to recruit against you negatively, then you're absolutely foolish. What did Deion Sanders say? Because he's talking about Tennessee, he's talking about SEC teams, he's talking about anybody that could possibly get in his way.
His exact quote was, yes, he said, speaking on a podcast with RG3, funny enough, who RG3 maybe needs to also keep his mouth shut because he's trying to start a war wars with Jay Gruden. And RG3, you're not going to win that fight because you didn't lose your starting job just in Washington. You lost it in Cleveland and you lost it in Baltimore. So, okay. Yeah. So he said on RG3's podcast, quote, I don't allow our coaching staff to ever comment on another school. You don't have to put another school down to put us up. I don't play that. And then he said, now kids have recorded conversations with head coaches, not just assistants, head coaches downing us and selling us out and just talking about us like a dog. I just politely call the head coach and say, look here, man, I don't really know you. I wish the best for you, but be careful because when these kids bring phones into your meetings, you are exposed to certain things. I'm not going to put you out there, but just keep my name out your mouth. I've had to have that conversation. That's quote, unquote with Deion.
Okay. Now, here's my thoughts on negative recruiting. And let me give you a little bit of insight from everybody. Remember Trooper Taylor? Who remembers Trooper Taylor? Hit the like button if you remember Trooper Taylor. Is it fair to call him one of Tennessee's most liked assistant coaches in the history of the program? Is it fair to call him one of Tennessee's best recruiters during his time at Tennessee? Caleb, are both of those statements fair?
Yes, it's also fair to say not promoting him may have cost Fulmer his job. He should have been the offensive coordinator in 2008.
Yes. Okay. He told me, he said, you never mention another school when you step in a living room because you're immediately down 14-0. Now, if somebody says, what do you think about Deion Sanders at Colorado? Because they are recruiting me heavily. And I just frankly want to ask you, even if he comes out and says he's a black guy, you're a white guy, because Deion himself has brought race into it, has he not?
Well, his recruits have, and I don't think his recruits got that from nowhere. They had to get that from him.
Okay, so it's been a talking point. I'm not just pulling stuff out of the air is the point I want to make. So if they even bring that up, say, listen, don't base it off any of that stuff. Just base it off history. Now, I don't think anybody is using racial epithets or personal attacks on Deion Sanders or personal attacks on any of his recruiters or ripping the city of Boulder, Colorado. But if they're saying, look at the track record, there is no track record, then Caleb, I got no issue with that. Do you?
I agree. No, not at all. And
also, by the way,
you have to be honest with people you're recruiting.
There is no rule against negative recruiting. If they want to step in there and start saying that Deion's a terrible person, he sleeps around, he's got a crack habit, I hear, and all of this, and Crack's made the 2 appearances on the program today. But if you want to just keep going on and on and on about Deion Sanders and ripping him, that's within the rules, and a lot of people do it, and a lot of people are successful at it. Usually not the great ones long term, but if that's what you want to do to make a name for yourself, that's a way to go about it, and it's going to happen.
Also, if Deion stays at Colorado long term, he's lying. Okay, because Deion at some point will start negatively recruiting because he'll have to. Okay, do you know what this reminds me of, Dave? You know when a politician runs for office and they say, I'm not going to attack my opponent. I'm just going to talk while I'm great. And then they always attack their opponent because they have to win.
Go back and say something. If Deion stays at Colorado, he's lying. So do you mean he's going to have to negative recruit against other people?
He's going to start negatively recruiting at some point if he gets Colorado to the level that he hopes to get Colorado at. And if he stays there long term, he's going to negatively recruit. That's how this is going to work. That's how this works. And he's going to negatively recruit the way you said Trooper Taylor does, maybe. He'll be asked about something, and he'll bring it up negatively on the other person. That's fine. I don't think it's...
Well, now, Trooper, I want to make sure I painted Trooper Taylor in the correct light. He wouldn't even negative recruit like he was asked about it. He would just dismiss it. But he did say it's understandable if a guy says, what about Deion Sanders? And you just give insight, you give information. I mean, I can tell you right now that I can give you facts. I can say Nick Saban didn't help Alabama by his timing of his announcement. I can do all those sorts of things. It doesn't mean I'm being negative about Nick Saban. Facts are facts. I don't believe, when I write a column, Caleb, I don't believe in positive or negative. I believe in bringing information, and I believe in bringing my opinion. That is the exact approach I would take as a recruiter. If you ask me about Dude, I'm going to tell you what I think about Dude, but I'm not going to go in offering it up, which is maybe different from a column.
Well, no, and this is and there's a great comment I'm seeing there that I actually wanted to address. There is still such thing as negative recruiting without directly negatively recruiting. And if you bring up race, like, don't you want to come play for this black head coach? That is negatively recruiting against white head coaches, isn't it?
Wow, that's great. Kind of flip my thinking on that. Yeah, that's kind of the worst negative recruiting. I mean, would you rather say, is it more negative to say that Colorado doesn't have the same facilities, it's cold there, he has no track record, or is it worse to say you should play for me because I'm the same race as you? Which is more negative?
Obviously, the second one.
Which is more off-putting? It's the latter.
It's the latter, easily. So the idea that he's not negative recruiting, assuming, and you and I don't believe that Jordan Seaton said the whole coach who looks like you thing out of nowhere. We think that came from the top. Then he's obviously negatively recruiting. And he may not call it negatively recruiting, but he absolutely is. Now, again, you're right. There's a difference between, there's direct negative recruiting that's unnecessary. You tell me, Dave. I don't know. I want to bring him up. Do you believe Lane Kiffin said what he said to Alshon Jeffrey? That you'll be pumping gas for the rest of your life if you go to South Carolina?
Yes.
Okay, he did. That is direct negative recruiting. That's unnecessary. Is it not fair to say that is direct negative recruiting? That is totally unnecessary.
Well, but see, here's my thing with negative recruiting. I think you reap what you sow, but I don't think it's against the rules. And if you want to do it, do it.
No, I agree. What you don't do, I'll bring up a guy that we just brought up before. You know what you never want to do? Negatively recruit against yourself. And Derek Dooley, do you remember how often he would talk about how bad a shape the program was in when he took over Tennessee?
Yes.
And you don't think that hurt him in recruiting? How are you supposed to go recruit to other players when you're in front of the media saying, man, we're in terrible shape, guys? I got to be honest. Like, how do you then go to a living room and be like, I didn't mean that when I said that? He constantly, I think that there was a moment where he said, this is like year one. Last year was year zero when he entered 2011. And I thought, okay, this is if you're trying to recruit for your school, you don't, to save yourself, talk about how bad your school is in the moment.
No, very, very good point. Very good point. I think that you've got to look at the Deion Sanders situation for what it is. It's fun. It's exciting. It's neat to watch. But is this going to be a real factor on the football field anytime soon? I don't think so. I don't think so. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun. Enjoy life better when you see better. The local vision service for LASIK, cataract surgery, and regular eye examination. That's Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Haun. But in the end, it hasn't hurt. It hasn't hurt Lane Kiffin, who you mentioned the Alshon Jeffrey comment about. He's still climbing the ladder, and I saw where he was named. We'll talk about this tomorrow. Coaches that have never won a championship, who are the most likely to do that. He was on a list of 7 by, I believe it's 247 Sports. Hasn't really hurt him. And I would imagine not to, this is purely speculation. I would imagine Lane Kiffin is one that engages in negative recruiting from time to time.
Yes, I think he's Lane. I mean, Lane Kiffin has publicly engaged in negative recruiting. I mean, how many shots did he take at Urban Meyer? So it's not like he's hidden from the fact that he likes to negatively recruit a lot.
No, and definitely. My problem is the whining about it and calling other recruits. And it strikes me as bizarre that Deion Sanders makes this statement on a podcast. Did he not think that would get out? Everything gets out.
He wants it out. No, he wants it out. He wants people to think that he's all positive energy and every other coach is some jealous negative energy. That's his thing.
Okay, but that leads me to the next thing. If he wants it out, Caleb, then why wouldn't you call Stephen A. Smith and get it out? My question is, have those guys started to turn a deaf ear because the story is fun, but you don't go to an amusement park and ride the same roller coaster over and over and over?
I think whatever you guys think of a Stephen A. Smith or a Skip Bayless, those guys do have a journalist background, so they would probably ask a follow-up question that might make Deion a little uncomfortable. So you go on RG3, a former players podcast, who's not going to push you on that. Same reason Cat Williams goes on Shannon Sharp's podcast and not Stephen A. Smith's, because Shannon Sharp, I love him, but he's not a journalist. So he's not going to ask you a follow-up question.